Hello, Evansville community, and anybody who's watching from all over the nation or, wherever you are, to the youth, to the families, to educators. We are going to do a recap of the youth town hall that took place March 2021. My name is Trinisia Brooks. I'm actually one of the research assistants from the University of Southern Indiana under the leadership of my amazing co-moderator, Dr. Joy Howard. She is a professor at the University of Southern Indiana. And briefly, the way that myself and Dr. Howard met is she was one of the core leaders of the And How Are the Children Network. And she handpicked 5 research assistants, and I was one of the 5 to come onto the network to facilitate some community projects. And so that's why we are here today, just to recap the youth town hall and some of the amazing touch points that the youth brought up. So on this first slide, this is just 2 pictures of the first one on the left-hand side is myself, Dr. Howard, and Miss Melissa Moorhead. We were actually on the radio promoting the event. Dr. Howard, I believe it's 98.5 WEOA. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And Melissa was so gracious, and she let us come on and talk, about the event and just to bring awareness to the community about the event. And we thank her. And the picture on the right-hand side is myself. I actually, this was one of 2 appearances on the news, I was actually on the lifestyles segment of the news. And I was able to go on and again promote the event. And we had an amazing time, and they even invited us to come back a second time. And so there was various ways that we were able to promote the event, which is why we feel like it was very successful. Dr. Howard, I believe this event was maybe watched by close to 3,000 people. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes. And so without the publicity of the radio station and the news and, Facebook and things of that nature, we would not have been able to have such a successful virtual event. So this next picture is a picture of myself and Dr. Howard with the youth. These are some of the courageous youth who participated in the event and shared some of their stories. They were vulnerable, and these youth, they attended different high schools, and they not all of them knew each other beforehand, and we were just very excited. And we just developed a sense of, community from these youth. Now, the youth and myself, co-moderators, and other people who assisted with the event, we were there in person, but the audience was actually live streamed. And so, of course, this was during the pandemic, during COVID. And so we were trying to be as careful as possible. So we weren't really inviting a lot of people from the outside to come in. So, as collectively, with so many brilliant minds, we came up with this amazing idea. Didn't know if it was going to be successful, but it all worked out, and our camera crew even, did an amazing job, and there was no glitches or anything throughout the process.
And I
So
wanted to say,
go ahead, Dr. Howard.
Back to the concept for the youth town hall, and just really, give you kudos in terms of how it all sort of came together, and the genesis of this event was really, in that time and space of looking at the 2 pandemics happening simultaneously, having to do with racism and then COVID, and really what are we saying within our community about mental health. And originally we had talked about having adult experts come on board and kind of talk and be in dialogue with youth, but then there was a real shift, and a risk taking that you took, and that we talked about in depth of, let's hear from and learn with and alongside and from the youth, because who knows better about what's happening with the youth than the youth themselves. And so I really just, that was a critical shift, I think, with the work of Empower the Children, to really give the youth the microphone and ask them, and how are the children, by the children, from the children. And so we learned so much with them as our teachers. So if you'll switch the slide, the first quote that I would like to share was from a young lady who began a youth organizing group called Students of Color EVV. And she said very aptly, racism, and I quote, "Racism didn't die with black and white photos." And she talked about microaggressions that don't feel so micro. She said, "It's apparent, it's systemic. I'm just like the system works actively to hold us down." And so she talked about how she started the initiative Students of Color EVV, and they get submissions from students across the city through Instagram. And she talked about how it's both been bitter and sweet simultaneously to hear those stories. And she talked about how Black people are still being called the N-word in schools and nothing's being done about it. And how there's microaggressions happening, sometimes involving teachers, and there's a real sense of isolation that she's noted from all the stories that she's been hearing, and it's oftentimes swept under the rug in schools. And so what I want to put a highlight on here is just the Students of Color EVV, started by the young people, for the young people. And she talked a lot about how there's a need and a space for other young scholars and the collective genius to continue that work forward. So I kind of wonder where that work is at right now, in the synergy. And so that's something that I wonder about now in fall of 21.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that as far as the synergy. Don't you agree that the youth were so mature beyond their years, who participated in the town hall, and some of the things that they were talking about, surprised us, and even some of the language and how, the microaggressions, and not a lot of people even know what microaggressions is. And for her to say that, microaggressions aren't so micro, they feel more macro, which I was just blown away by her perspective. And that, with her making that comment, that just let me know that she has really thought about this deeply, and she is able to connect what's not right and what she feel that is right. And not a lot of people can do that, even adults. And so for her to make that comment, I thought that was amazing. And then, the group that she led, the Students of Color EVV, and how she was able to put that on her back. And for those of you who don't know what Students of Color EVV is, it's a student-led organization where they accept anonymous submissions from students, from high school students, throughout the tri-state area. And those high school students share their anonymous submissions with Students of Color EVV about some of their experiences, and they post them on their Instagram website. And so and then just the different things that they did over the summer, how they were protesting, as you can see, every Sunday at 11 o'clock, they were protesting, take a stand against racism. And they were downtown, in Evansville, Indiana, faithfully, protesting with what they feel is right and letting their voices be heard. And she even had the young lady who started this movement, she even had her own segment on the news, where she talked about this particular event. And she, was just promoting and bringing awareness to this. And so Again, this young lady is in college right now, but I know that, she did a lot of different things to try and keep this going, while she's away. And I can't wait to talk to her and just see where she's at, and some of the new things that they have going on with students of color EBV, and how we as a community can get to, integrate ourselves with this particular organization, and so that we can keep their voices heard in the community. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and a couple of things I was thinking about, with regard to this this young lady's comments, was one of the things I remember is that she said, she was George Floyd and so many other people who have wrongfully died. And the violence and community conversations across the nation, she thought to herself, what do I do? Right? Like, what do I have? And she thought, well, I have Instagram and I've got my phone, right? And so I thought it really showcased the innovation and resourcefulness of our young people, and is a challenge to us old people too, right? Like, you have something, you have a voice, you've got tools, you've got resources, you've got community, you've got a network. So I think it really brought forth a challenge to all of us to say, don't say you can't do anything, right?
And it was very risky. It was very risky for her to put this weight on her shoulders. And I feel like, that was the time of George Floyd, and so many different people were inspired to let their voices be heard. And for her to, I don't think that people understand the magnitude of what it took for her to start an organization like this, and to, make herself vulnerable, because she was still a student, and she didn't care about the repercussions. She realized that it was not just about her. And that's one of the things that I took from it as well.
So the next topic that got brought up was another young man who shared that he said, when people retaliate because something bad happens, we're seen as the menace, and we, in that statement being young Black students, we're seen as the bad guy. I've seen it at my school. A boy called the N-word with the hard R, and he ended up fighting the boy, but it ended up that he was the only one punished and expelled from school. It's like they don't even investigate deep enough. They cut the surface of the topic, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, that was a very strong observation by that particular student. And I think that the student is basing their perspective off of experiences and things that they have seen throughout, their experience. And it sounds like that experience is students of color are punished or receive consequences at a much higher rate than their peers, based off of just the history and the trajectory of students of color, and how, they are 3 times or 4 times more likely to be expelled or dropped out, or so on and so forth. And so I feel like that student was viewing or was making that statement from that lens of just because, we are at a higher rate as far as, being in the criminal justice system or being suspended or expelled, does not mean that, that stigma or that label should be placed on all of us. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And, I want to go back to sort of the beginning of the work of Empower the Children Evansville, which really started with data on discipline, was one of the major areas of suspensions and expulsions being an indicator of, wellness and educational access, right? And so really this student reminded from the personal eye space, right, and his lived experience of really calling into question what is violent, right? Because the N word, I would say, is a violent word. And so really asking a tough question, I think, of educators, us as educators, and of the community, and really to, ask a very difficult question about what counts as violent and what doesn't count, right? And how is it punished or just dismissed as a minor offense, right? So I think that's something for us to take up as a community as well.
Absolutely.
And continually revisit, right? And not call it case closed, because that's an ongoing conversation.
Yes.
Trinisia, if you will click to the next one. Another student shared a really interesting perspective. I felt like she was an honors student at a primarily white school, and was one of the only racial minorities in all of her classes. And she recounted her memory and her experience as being an honors student, and said, they'll have conversations and say, oh, she's in here, and they don't want me to hear it. They have not say certain things around me. And another thing is, I feel like I constantly have to prove my intelligence. They make it seem like they think I'm not as smart as they are. And she's also said that going to a primarily white school, she said that she gets accused of acting white. And she says, but honestly, I'm not. I'm just proper, meaning how she talks and her vocabulary. And they just assume that all Black people do this or that, but we're just all ourselves. So
Yeah,
I thought that was an important narrative.
Yeah, very important narrative. I think that the past historical literature just has a lot to do with perspectives, current perspectives, and just contemporary times right now, and how things are. And this particular student, still feels the same way as far as feeling isolated or feeling like she doesn't belong. But that's the lens that, that she views things. And she didn't just wake up feeling that way. She understood the assignment and what was happening, but I feel like that what was happening, her perspective is not something that happened overnight, if that makes sense. And it's just a lot of things that's happening in contemporary times has a lot to do with history. That's just my perspective.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that I ask my students to think about is this notion of smartness, right? And who gets counted as smart. What does smart look like? What does smart sound like? And what are the stereotypes that we assign to smartness? And I think that there's definitely an intersection of race that gets assigned to smartness very inappropriately, and she's calling that out. And then I think there was other things that we don't have time to get into here, but everyone has definitely access through Facebook of the original recording about, whose knowledge counts, and what stories and what curriculum is taught or erased from our curriculum. And I think that, really deep questions about intelligence as well as knowledge and what knowledge matters in schools was really brought out by her comments. The next comment was from another leader who was an active member in a community organization, a youth-led community organization, who talked about how he only got 3 hours of sleep within several days leading up to the town hall itself, and how, that was because of the demands of his tests and school and extracurricular activities, and that truly had an impact on his mental health. And this was an amazing young man who was giving it his all, right? And he was talking about, I'm studying until 12 o'clock at night. And so, but said it definitely took an effect. So his group, I guess, was petitioning the school district to have, or he thought of the idea at least, to have free mental health days without any consequences. Because he said, if you need a day off, or you come back and you're absent from school, then you have double the stress. So it really doesn't have a benefit to take a day off. And he said, and I quote, "We need time to rest our minds and think about what we're going to do next." And so I thought that was a really important, call for action, and a really concrete idea that at least left a space to debate with, but do something with. It's not just, well, young people should be mentally well, but like, this was a concrete idea for us to ponder. How would that look,
Yeah, and as someone who believes in neuroscience and enjoys neuroscience in the brain, this particular young man was basically saying that if you guys want us to be productive, then in order for us to be calm, focused, and ready to learn, our brains need a break. And, our brains are tired. And we know that if, our amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's always jived up or in fight or flight, if it's tired and if I can't function, then I'm not able to access my upper brain, which is my prefrontal cortex, where I'm able to do all the thinking, and that's where the working memory takes place, and that's where the decision making is happening. And so basically he was saying, because a lot of students are stressed, that they're always, in their reactive brain, and because they are sitting in that particular, place, that they're not being their best, bringing their best selves to school, where they are, focused and rested and able to learn and make those decisions using their executive functioning skills. And so that was a interesting proposition that youth made. And I know that youth is part of different youth city councils. And that's something that he indicated that him and his youth had been talking about. And in that same youth, Dr. Howard, I believe he mentioned, bringing like multicultural classes to their particular school. And he talked a lot about how he feels some of the literature is more European history, and how he, would like to see more of multicultural history being taught in schools. And so he definitely wanted his voice to be heard, just like all of the youth. And these are only a few topics, right, Dr. Howard, that was discussed, from this youth town hall. There were so many different topics discussed, about cultural awareness and suicide, and, LGBTQ, which hopefully we're going to have another segment where we can really elaborate more on more things. But yes, definitely the youth was, I don't think he was being combative at all. I just feel like he was speaking for himself and his peers about, how mental health is real, and it can be very toxic and exhausting, and bring about that stress that will prevent him and others from just maximizing their highest potential, right?
Yeah.
So,
and that same youth also gave a charge. He said, if anyone from the school board is watching, please use our voices as a stepping stone. Keep these messages in the back of your mind, so we cannot leave this as a lost cause and be swept away in the wind. We're capable of doing everything that everyone else is. And so I thought that was absolutely a charge to the adults and leaders in the community that we have to take very seriously, and so I think we've just highlighted it today, a few of those things, like you said, and there was much more in there, but a few concrete themes from that night to sort of recap. And we are in an effort to make this video, we wanted to bring those up again and not let the conversation die out and not let things be swept away in the wind, right? What they shared with us very bravely mattered and was very important. One of the ideas that we had as a result, we debriefed the conversation after it was aired and sat down with the students. And one of the things that we talked about was having a radio follow-up show on the 5th Saturdays of the month throughout the year. And so that spot has been held for youth to come on if they will. So that's another proposition, I think, to the youth in our community to hold the mic again and perpetually, right? Miss Melissa Moorhead is willing to host that show, and I think some of the youth have gone on, but it's an open invite, right? So
yes. And then these, it took a village to really create this project, and I know Dr. Howard can second that. She and I became very close friends throughout this process. But these are, this is Dr. Howard and 4 of the graduate research assistants. We are missing one lovely lady. She's not present. She's the 5th one, but it really took a village to bring this project to fruition. And these are just some of the individuals from the And How Are the Children Evansville Network who helped to put this together. And then of course, so many different members from the community, which are not pictured here, but it was definitely a collaborative effort. Dr. Howard, anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, and the work continues forward. There's a new leadership team that is comprised of Shayla and Trinisia, who are pictured here, as well as Melissa and some other folks who are really taking the lead in moving the work forward. And Joanne
Yes.
at the library. And so the library is a wonderful, EVPL is such a wonderful space for the community work. And one of the things that we've done so far in sort of reconvening and reshaping what's next within How Are the Children is to come up with the mission. And so the collective agreement on the mission statement, I'll let Trinisia read that.
Yes. Yes. So our revised mission statement, we put a lot of thought into this, but it is, and how are the children Evansville supports and develops support systems that actively engage in connecting our community in ways that empower African-American children to reach their full potential. So that is the concluding mission statement that myself and Dr. Howard and many members of the community came up with that really solidifies what the network is all about. And you guys can follow us on many different platforms. Facebooks is not plural, it's singular. So, and How Are the Children Evansville, you can find us on Facebook. And then our website is andhowarethechildrenevv.org. You can also email us at andhowarethechildrenevansville@gmail.com. And then you can find us on YouTube at How Are the Children Evansville, which Dr. Howard, I believe we're probably going to post this maybe on YouTube and our Facebook page.
That's right.
Okay. And that is our last slide. But yes, we wanted to, our goal was to do a brief wrap up. We kind of got long-winded because we're so passionate about talking about these different topics. But this is not the last taping that myself and Dr. Howard and other members from And How Are the Children Evansville will do. But we did want to do something short and sweet just to refresh everybody's memory, memory, and to definitely keep uplifting youth voices and to keep the conversation going. Dr. Howard, I'll punt it to you.
And so one of the things that we've really talked about as a network is to not just have the identity as in how are the children in Evansville, but truly to ask the question consistently and perpetually and very genuinely. So I want to conclude with the question to anybody who's watching, and how are the children Evansville?